Hello and welcome to another episode of DSO Secrets. I am Ken Kaufman, your guest host today, filling in for the ever illustrious Emmett Scott. I'm excited about the guest that we have on. Nathan Chitty's joining us. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ken. Good to be here.
Awesome. All right. So a little bit about Nathan. He's currently the CFO and Director of Business Development at Operation Dental, which is headquartered in Orlando, Florida. He's got a business degree from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He has been in the finance world for 43 years. So that means you started at about the age of 5, right, Nathan? Just so we get ages aligned correctly. But he's been involved in debt raises, equity raises, scaling startups, and turning them into thriving enterprises, and lots of successful exits in his past.
Thank you.
The last piece, Nathan was one of 5 CFOs on a panel at the Spring Elite Intensive meeting that happened last week in Dallas, Texas. And we had a great time jumping into a lot of topics with DSO owners and group practices that are thinking about becoming DSOs. And that was a lot of fun. So Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
All right. So here's my starter question. Anytime I have these finance leaders on, so what is it that led you to this DSO industry, and what in the world are you still doing here?
So it was a personal connection with the Chief Operating Officer of Operation Dental. I've known him 12 years, worked with him in the past. And when they reached the point where they needed to create an internal accounting finance infrastructure, he reached out to me, and I joined him last July. And it's really been quite a good ride so far. And we look over the next 3 to 5 years to continue the growth rate that we've had, which is basically 100% a year for the last 3 years. So 3 million in revenue this year we'll do in the mid-20s. And so that's how I got here.
Yeah, really rapid growth. I'm assuming all acquisition at this point. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, outstanding. So it's been a little while since I've done one of these types of interviews. So just to remind the listeners, we're going to get into some get to know you questions so we can learn a little bit deeper about what's happening at Operation Dental, and also what expertise and knowledge base on the accounting and finance side exist at Operation Dental. So we'll give you some time there, Nathan. And then we've got some more in-depth questions because I really want to pick away at some of your expertise about raising debt and equity. It is one of the great pain points in this industry, and you're feeling it, you're experiencing it, and love to hear comparisons, but we'll get to that in a second. Then we've got our lightning round at the end, which is kind of fun. And then we'll do a wrap up. So that's our flow here. So why don't you start us off? Tell us about the total number of locations that growth to about 20 million in revenue has you guys at.
So eight locations. We'll add probably 6 this year. We have, I think, 17 practitioners, 17 doctors right now.
Okay, outstanding. And how many states are you in? Just Florida at this point, or have you expanded it? Okay, so
we're really just in Central Florida, Orlando and Jacksonville, but our growth plan really would go from Jacksonville south of I-95 west over to Orlando and Tampa, and then down to Sarasota and the West Coast. So that's kind of our target market.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a great explanation. And we've talked about your growth strategy at this point is acquisition. Have you guys contemplated de novo, or really just focused on the acquisition part for now?
We've got one de novo in process that was in a high growth area west of Orlando, but we are contemplating, I would say, a de novo department, and I wouldn't be surprised if next year we wouldn't do 5, maybe 5, 6.
Okay, outstanding. Okay, so you're not going to be a one-trick pony here. You're going to try both tricks, which is great. Nothing wrong with that for sure.
Well, as you know, when you build it yourself, as opposed to acquisition, you're building it at maybe a third to a half of the cost of what you would pay if you bought it, and you get to do it just like you want it. And there's disadvantages, negative cash flow, hard to finance, all those kind of things. But what you end up with de novo practices are in the right spots with the right equipment, and all those positives. But we focused on acquisitions, but we realized that in the high growth Florida market, it would be unwise to neglect expansion by de novo.
That's great. I love the way you put that, actually. So let's just talk software and some systems for a minute. Primarily, as listeners are participating, we want to encourage networking. Come over to the DSO Secrets Facebook group. Nathan's over there. Chat him up. Throw some questions out, especially if he's using some software, or if they've implemented some systems or processes that you're trying to figure out, or you'd like to network around. So jumping into the software side, walk us through, what are you guys using for practice management?
Open Dental, and we're in the process of implementing Jarvis, which we went through a selection process and really like what we think it will do for us in terms of providing practice level analytics. And so we're very excited about that. From a accounting perspective, we're still using QuickBooks decentralized with an aggregation program called QVinci.
That's handling the consolidations. I'm assuming you have an entity per practice and it's handling all the consolidations.
We got a bunch of entities. Yeah.
Well, welcome to dental. That's how we roll.
You know how these things go, but we'll go where you are at some point, whether it's NetSuite or to a more enterprise level. But for the next year, as long as we can postpone it, we'll stick with the QuickBooks Enterprise.
Great. And then on the practice management software, just jumping back to that for a second, when you do the acquisitions, are you in a hurry to get them converted over, or are you letting them stay in their current system if they're not on Open Dental? What's your strategy around that?
We're pretty much in a hurry. Yeah, we want to get everybody integrated in the same thing, and we want to be respectful of people's customs and how they're operating. But we can add the most value when we implement our system. We're very sensitive to the people that are in the the legacy practices and situations, but we want to get everybody onto Open Dental.
Okay, that's great. Tell us about, because one of the challenges of having all these entities and all these practices, and then they're getting spread out, through the state of Florida. Are you doing any type of AP automation, or all the invoices coming in paper format and you're paying them out? Do you have a software there, or what's your process?
We're automating the accounts payable function through ACH payments with Bill.com. We evaluated doing it through the bank. It seems like the Bill.com is a little bit easier for us. So in terms of getting money, we have a centralized billing department that is highly specialized and efficient. And it's really a godsend to the acquisitions, because there's so many problems that they can focus on the customer as opposed to the appeal process and insurance and that sort of thing.
Yeah, perfect. How about payroll HRIS system? What are you guys using to manage that?
EDP, this is an interesting question, because what we've done, the controller that we have, Jonathan, fabulous detail person, and we kind of, I leave those details to him. He's been hired in the last 5 months, knew the company principles, and so I'll be a little light on my detail, other than saying that we are using ADP.
Okay, great. Well, and the reality is ADP and Paychex and a lot of these larger ones, they turn into your HRIS system, especially when you're at the size where you're at. You can pull down hours to run FTE reports and anything and everything from there.
I haven't been in on the loop of the selection, but we are using an HR outsourcing consulting company to deal with, personnel issues, to make sure we're handling, particularly if there's a troublesome situation that we are getting advice on how to handle that. But I'm not sure which one it is.
Well, that makes sense. And with the type of growth that you guys are experiencing, this is a people business, right? I always say 60 cents of every dollar that leaves our businesses are going into the pocket of employees or to pay for their benefits or to pay some statutory tax associated with them, right? And so it's managing all of that is a critical element of building a great DSO. How about for forecasting and planning? I would imagine you guys are probably using Excel primarily, and I'd love to hear your thought process around how you're doing that.
Yes, Excel. What we've got is a single spreadsheet that has a table of contents and up to 60 different worksheets that show various parts. So they're generally aggregations of QuickBooks exports, but they are also other sort of finance analysis. So the goal would be that we have in one place all of our financial analysis and reporting to the bank and to anybody that we talk to. So it's not, sending them 10 spreadsheets and you got to go from here to here. Everything's clickable. They're indexed, updated on a monthly basis. So that's the backbone of our financial analysis.
Okay, that's great. Helpful to understand. So I want to jump into these more in-depth questions and really interested. And you've been out Operation Dental, remind me, for how long?
Since July.
Since July. So getting close to a year, roughly 9-10 months. Walk me through how raising debt and equity works in every other industry compared to the DSO industry. But I'd love to hear your compare and contrast and some of the challenges that are here. Because sometimes, maybe I'll just lay this as the preface, some of our listeners have only been dentists for their whole lives and only been in the dental industry and don't know what this looks like outside of dental. And I think giving some contrast would be helpful.
Well, the financing environment on the 1 to 2 practice level is very easy. Banks love these kind of loans. They do very favorable circumstances. Because of the characteristics of a dental practice, it's called an asset light loan or an asset light company, which means there's not inventory, a lot of accounts receivable compared to the goodwill, et cetera. So there's a blank spot. You can go with a local bank or maybe a regional bank up to maybe 5 million in debt. And then after that, you've got to find for banking somebody that's really more specialized, as Zions, a Citibank, those are the two that really jump out. So what we've done is done all of our financing bootstrap internal with bank, but we're reached the point where we have to get other types of financing, private placement, 506c private placements. We're exploring crowdfunding, which has recently been increased from a 1 million annual to a 5 million. And think of it like taking your company public without having a stock exchange. So a lot of need.
Kind of micro investors potentially, right?
Well, they can be, but not in our case. What we're seeking to do is find a regulatorily compliant method to issue equity to the dentist. So we're using it as part of our acquisition strategy as well as the private placement, because our goal is to provide as much value to the dentist financially as we can. And when you cut out intermediaries of that private equity, you're able to pass through more of the economics of the situation. So what you have there, we'll do about 3 to 4 million in EBITDA this year, something like that. And we're so to really get the flexibility with big banking where they really don't care your industry, they're just looking at how much money you make. We really need to be almost 10 million in EBITDA. So it's a struggle from where we are now to get to that 6 to 10 million in EBITDA. And we'll manage it through some creative techniques, we think.
Outstanding. So let me just back up then, and ask this, or let's clarify this. So initially, dentists are able to get these loans one-off to do acquisitions or to build practices, and then they hit a ceiling, whether it's somewhere around 5 million of total outstanding debt, or I know the banks also use a global debt coverage ratio around that dentist, whoever that guarantor is, and they're going to look and say, hey, once your debt service gets above a certain percentage of your global income, including, the dividends or earnings you're getting from these dental practices, that's the other place where that trigger hits. And you kind of hit a dead end, and you don't have the ability to get financing. You then have to step up to a whole new level of sophistication, of professionalization, and of really specialty organizations that focus on doing more what's called cash flow lending, where they're lending based on EBITDA as opposed to your personal guarantee and putting liens on equipment, and those sorts of things. Because again, like you said, there's so much goodwill in dentistry, or in dental businesses, relative to.
Let me make 2 points about this.
Yeah, great.
Simplify it. Leverage as defined by people that lend in this industry, the numerator is your bank debt. It's called senior debt that secures the practice. That's the numerator. The denominator is the EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, also called cash flow. So numerator is debt, senior debt. Denominator is EBITDA. And that figure needs to be 4 or less. In our case, it's about 2.8, something like that. So that's the first of 2 measures. The second of the 2 measures has debt service coverage. The numerator is how much you have in EBITDA. The denominator is how much you're paying out for your interest, your principal payments on your debt, your planned capital expenditures, your distributions to your owners. So leverage as defined by debt over EBITDA, and debt service coverage as defined by EBITDA divided by what you're paying out. Those are the two metrics.
Yeah. And the reason why they have the 2 is because the funded debt to EBITDA ratio is great, but you can hide a lot of things from showing up in EBITDA. For example, your financing costs, right? Your interest and even principal payments. You could capitalize things very aggressively, perhaps even too aggressively, to try to keep that out of your EBITDA number, as well as you can be pushing distributions out as opposed to guaranteed payments or paying salaries. You could be pushing those out. Those wouldn't draw EBITDA down. What the second ratio does is it gives the bank comfort that you are keeping enough cash flow in the business, and it's not going out to these other to these other avenues that EBITDA misses. It's the shortfall of using EBITDA. Everybody on this show has heard me rant about this before, that EBITDA is a lazy man's shortcut to cash flow. They literally have to create a second ratio to make sure that the cash flow is truly represented correctly. Go ahead.
Where that comes in, the fine print of that, keep in mind the numerator is EBITDA, the denominator are these payments, interest, principal, but there's also payments of unfunded, unfinanced capital expenditures.
Exactly.
Planned distributions, other I'm trying to think. Those are really the main ones, and so. Right. You have those items. And here's the problem with EBITDA from a standpoint, the big picture problem with EBITDA. EBITDA is a variable. It can vary a lot over time. And so you can, if you have a big change in your EBITDA, you can get out of compliance with your loan covenants, and B, having a serious discussion with the bank. The benefit of our industry is, though, that the diversification with having all the practices really mitigates a lot of the variability of EBITDA across the enterprise.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. It's wonderful perspective. I think for those listening in, this is liquid gold to understand these metrics and how this works, so that you can speak intelligently and understand what has to happen in your business. Now, let me ask this, Nathan, and I've got a follow-up. Have you guys moved forward with any outside CPA attestation work, be it via compilation, review, or audit?
I'm so glad you're asking that question. Where we are now is audited financial statements, and where we were in 19 was reviewed financial statements. And this is an area, Ken, where you really need to think of the future, because the gold standard for financial reporting are audited financial statements, where the CPA expresses an unqualified opinion on your balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow.
And let me insert something here, Nathan, because I just want to make sure our listeners get this. So there's kind of 4 levels of financial statements. Level 1 is internally prepared. To be clear, banks, once you get above this 5 million threshold, or where you can't loan practice by practice, or you can't borrow practice by practice anymore, banks do not trust your internally prepared financial statements. They want to see an outside expert, and it requires a professionalization and an upgrade in accounting. And people ask all the time, when should I hire the CFO? When should I hire a VP of finance? When you're getting into this world and needing to bring to get the next level of your financials, this is it. So starting at first is internally prepared financial statements. And by the way, the bank, again, doesn't trust those much. The next one is a compilation. This is a very basic, lightly touched by CPA, where they're putting things together so you can see, hey, this is what things look like at a global level. The next level is a reviewed financial statement by CPA, and then the last by CPA firm, and then the last one is an audited financial statement. Could you, Nathan, just talk about the value of these 3, when and where you might want to use them, and like, what was your thought process to just leap over everything and go straight to audited financial statement? Well, no, you didn't, because you were reviewed, and then you've done the leap to audited.
We did reviewed financial statements as our first step up, and a reviewed financial statement basically has the footnote disclosures that would primarily occur in an audited financial statement, but it limits the verification that takes place of actually tying things to external sources like bank statements and things like that. So here we were in December of last year with our bank, and we were contemplating an acquisition, rather substantial for us, $4.5 million acquisition, and they wanted us to do a quality of earnings report, which involves hiring an external contractor to go into the target and do their own continuity of earnings, and they kind of look for trouble with that. And so it was not timely for us to engage that. It was in December, and we said, well, how about if we upgrade to an audited statement from a reviewed statement? The reaction we got was, well, there's no way you can do that. You don't have time, because we need this in January. And I said, well, I'll talk to our CPA, and our CPA came back and said, we'll deliver you an audited statement by the end of January. And they did. And so,
and the only reason I have to preface this, like, we've got to be careful. It's only because you've got a really strong controller, and you in a leadership role that knows and understands this, that you were ready, and the CPA got confidence that they could get that done. If you're not organized, there's no way somebody can get that done in a month.
That's a great point. And I would do a real big shout out to CLA Larson Allen, because what we did with kind of dividing and conquering before we brought on the controller is we utilized CLA Larson Allen in Dallas to do monthly compilation reports. Mm-hmm. So we had essentially a closing every month with someone looking over our shoulder before I got there and before the controller got there, talking with the operating officer and the owner. Hey, this is what we're seeing. And so you're exactly right. We couldn't have come close to that if we said, okay, let's just do this. We had that support of CLA in order to make that transition. And the CPA firm really stepped up and allowed us to have that unqualified opinion.
Yeah, it's really an amazing step. And I can tell you, and maybe I want to have you comment on this, Nathan. If you were going to the bank to raise equity right now, which I know, we're all always out in the market looking around and sniffing for what opportunities there are. But that aside, if it was your first time raising true senior debt, you're above that 5 million mark, you're going to market. Walk me through the difference between showing up to these, specialty banks and saying, hey, we're ready to go. Here's our financial statements. And they say, oh, do you have a review? Do you have an audit? And you say, oh, no, I don't. Here, let me go back and get that. And then I'll come back. Versus if you're dialed up ready and you're like, oh yeah, sure, I'm happy to provide that. You hand it over to them. Walk me through in the banker's mind what's happening and what type of confidence we're building with their credit department and underwriting department.
Yeah, it's so true. When you're able to think ahead, that's, here we are, we're in late April, early May, now's the time to be thinking about, the year end and how you're going to prepare for it, because you can't do stuff overnight. So when you show up with, or let's say you have an ongoing relationship, you're just giving your banker the best arsenal to advocate for your position, because when you give audited statements, they know that the numbers are there. And so I just really encourage, if people are in a growth mode for acquisitions, headed in that direction of high growth, like a lot of DSOs are, get to the audited statement as soon as you can.
And to get there, you have to invest into the right employees internally and building out the right processes. Let me throw just this one fun horror war story from my past into the mix here. We were actually putting a merger together. This is before I was at Community Dental Partners, and we went in and kind of lightly merged. But the other organization we had audited, the other organization didn't. And so we said, okay, we'll get in there and we'll get things audited. Well, guess what? They were such a mess. We could not get the audit done. There wasn't enough third-party verification. Reports had been destroyed or thrown away or whatever from the past. There were a lot of different missteps. And I'll tell you, it's not the only reason, but it is one of the main reasons why that merger got completely unwound. And it was because that organization hadn't invested internally into the right processes, systems, and people so that they could be quote unquote auditable. And so it's an investment that has to be made.
That's why the process that we went through before I got there to get with CLA, it was a great bridge between the external capabilities to internal, and it was we got lucky that we did it that way.
Yeah, and so I think maybe one of the few takeaways to think about here is, if you're thinking you're going to get to this place where you're not going to be able to raise debt per practice moving forward based on your own personal credit and guarantee, and you're looking at going to a more senior debt type of a situation, you should be thinking right now about making the investments that will be required to get to at minimum reviewed, if not go all the way to the audited financial statements. Again, you go to the bank, even if your internal stuff, even if CLA is preparing amazing internal stuff, they do not trust it like they do that independent outside party attestation at the reviewer or audit level.
What the monthly did for us with CLA is, it kept us from not being aware of problems, because they look over things and they challenge you about how you classified stuff. So it just, you're not behind at the end of the year to try to figure out what happened in March or April or July. It's every month, you have that closing.
Amazing. I can't stress to the listeners how valuable this advice is that you're getting right now, and how much of a difference it can make if you're really looking to grow and scale. This will be a major pain point and a major constraint to growth, unless you think about it and listen to all this advice. And of course, there are plenty of other folks in the industry that can help fill in some of the gaps. Okay, Nathan, this has been awesome. We've been in a great rhythm around this. Any other areas of advice or pieces of advice you'd offer to groups that are growing and trying to figure out this debt and equity financing thing? Other pieces of advice that you'd share with them as they're contemplating and planning for this?
Well, I can just share what we did, which I think worked out to be a good plan. And that's as follows. We built out an internal executive management team, so it wasn't just a one-man band. So in our internal executive team, we've got the CEO, who's the founder, Dennis, Peter Kelly, and he is the clinical director and does high-level business development. We've got Matt Robinson, who is very gifted on the ground, operationally sensitive, works with people, supervises people well. We have a marketing guy that is our new patient count would just amaze you, because we've had one practice in a year and a half has gone from 1.6 million. They'll do over 3.2 this year, and practice we bought last year that did 800,000 will do 2 million this year. It's new patients and adding practitioners, but there's sticker shock for the aspirational small DSO. Oh, can I afford to, to hire people? And it's really a tough thing. And then bringing on the controller who really is able to be in touch with the details, and my part is external financing. So that's a pretty heavy management team, but we've managed to keep 20% on the bottom line for EBITDA margin, which is a good margin. So this is the struggle. When do you commit to building those relationships? Because they don't happen overnight. Our team functions very well. We're positioned for high growth, but we've been working together closely. We've got our individual responsibilities. That's the tough part for someone making that transition. Can they really recruit the high-level management team? That's my advice. If you want to be big.
I think it's great advice. And it's an interesting thing. You can argue the chicken or egg, which came first, the really high performing practices or the management team. That leadership management team, when it's right and when it's functioning properly, it should be driving that very impressive growth and success, profitability at the practice level that should end up paying for itself over time. That's the formula, but it's hard to make those initial hires because if you go hire a marketing person, it may take them 3, 6, 9 months before they really get into the rhythm and get processes and systems going, and as well preparing them for scale. Because if you're buying 5 practices or starting 5 practices, that's a heavy lift. So anyways, we could probably talk about that for a while. All right, Nathan, we're going to graduate out of this. I appreciate the deep dive on all things debt and equity financing. We didn't get to all things, but we covered a decent amount of it. We're going to jump to our lightning round. What are you currently working on?
So we're currently working on arranging the financing for our next level of growth, and we are heavily involved in discussions with a PEG, but also mezzanine financing and private placement. And so the goal is to retain our independence by having less than 15-20% outside ownership, and by utilizing mezzanine financing and private placement 506C, private placements Reg D 506C, which is financing securities with accredited investors that you can advertise. That's up to 5, and you can raise up to $5 million a year. So that's the big.
It's amazing, Nathan. I love the fact that you've come into our industry and you're introducing some of these thought processes, because these would be considered less traditional, than going straight to the PEG or private equity group. But there's some real potential opportunity around it. So I love that you guys are working on this.
Here's the thing to remember. We're not inventing something new that's not being done. It's being done extensively, particularly in the real estate industry, which is also a cash flow positive industry. Mm-hmm. We're just doing it in the DSO world where it's not been done before.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right. What are you the most proud of?
The way our management team works together. We like each other. We have the same sort of ethics, and we're not afraid to hold each other accountable and be friends, but yet firm in our areas. So I'd say I'm most proud of the management team and the leadership, particularly of the founder, who doesn't have to. He's willing to share and delegate to people that are capable of doing their jobs. So that's what I'm most proud of.
It's something special. I've been on some leadership teams that have really struggled to get that cohesion, and it's something special when you can get there. All right, favorite sports team?
Well, University of Tennessee Volunteers, but it hadn't been much. I have to go back to 98 national championships.
I got it. Hey, you're loyal. That's what counts here, right? Favorite hobby?
I love to read, and I love to be thinking and talking with people about ideas of what I read. So I would say reading and study is my greatest hobby.
That's awesome. And favorite app that you use on your phone?
I've got a Samsung Note. I've got a 10, and I love the interface of the Samsung Android with the pen. I use it all the time. So as I have a lot of apps, probably 100. Home entertainment tools, banking, social media. So.
But you like your note-taking ability. That's what you think you probably use.
No, it's the pen interface of being able to press the
for navigation. Got it.
It's really for navigation, not much for note-taking. And I had the Note 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, and I'm going to go to 20 before too long, I'm sure.
There you go. And favorite spreadsheet function?
I like a blank canvas, and my favorite spreadsheet function actually is the organization of a complex series of spreadsheets that are interconnected through linking, naming ranges. And so I'm kind of an artist in that regard. I like to start with a blank canvas and think deeply about, what am I trying to create? What
the accounting functions, things like that. Is there any other advice that you'd give to emerging groups that are trying to figure out how to get to the next level?
Well, it's a basic, but really try to understand where you want to go. Do you want to have 30 practices, or do you want to have 5 or 10? And try to be realistic about arranging the resources that it'll take to get to this point. But it's a personal decision. Like in our case, our CEO is 34 years old. And so you have to take into account what the life goals are of your management team, of your dentists that are part of it. And so I would really do some really serious staring at the wall. Where do I want to be? What kind of organization do I want to provide for my employees? So that's what I would say.
It's outstanding. All right. How can listeners, members of this DSO Secrets group, how can they get a hold of you? What are the best ways? Facebook, LinkedIn?
All right. I actually am ready for that. Let's see if I can.
I'll try to read this off so you can benefit from it.
So I just encourage everyone to be active in building their LinkedIn network and to make their name a custom URL. Mine's at LinkedIn Nathan Chitty, but get rid of those letters and numbers at the end that they assign you. I've got your my common contacts with you. I have 35 first degree contacts with you. So 35 people that you're connected with first degree and I'm connected with in common. And so I've got my email address in here, Nathan at Operation Dental, my mobile phone, 407-616-5824. You know, we have one of the things I've really appreciated about DSO World is the helping nature. Very happy to answer questions or participate in the community.
Outstanding. Nathan, it's been an absolute privilege. I think we went down a really interesting road that is going to be really, really helpful for the listeners. Many, many thanks to all of you for joining today. This is a wrap on all things DSO equity and debt raising with CFO Nathan Chitty. Happy day.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.